The death of Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a wealthy businessman with connections to some really powerful individuals. He was arrested in July 2019 on federal charges of sex trafficking minors. It was said that he had an entire island where he and his rich friends would get together and sleep with underage girls. On August 10, 2019, Epstein was found dead in his jail cell in New York City. It was officially ruled a suicide by hanging. That's why his death immediately sparked many conspiracy theories. Epstein was supposed to be under constant surveillance due to a previous suicide attempt, but the guards reportedly fell asleep and the cameras that were filming the cell nonstop stopped working just before the suicide. Dr. Michael Baden, a forensic pathologist, suggested Epstein's neck injuries were more consistent with homicidal strangulation rather than suicide. That statement contradicted the official autopsy report. Epstein allegedly collected compromising information on many powerful individuals, including Prince Andrew and former President Bill Clinton. That led to speculation that he was murdered to protect them and others who were on the island. Despite many investigations and the conviction of his partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, the full truth about Epstein's death remains in the dark. Many believe we may never fully uncover what truly happened in that New York jail cell. The murder of Tupac Shakur. Next on the list is the tragic murder of Tupac Shakur. On the night of September 7, 1996, Tupac was shot multiple times in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas after attending a Mike Tyson boxing match. He died from his injuries 6 days later, at the age of only 25. The most common theory involves gang rivalry. Just before the shooting, Tupac and his friends were involved in a violent fight with Orlando Anderson, who was a known Crips gang member. Some believe that after that fight, Anderson and his gang retaliated by organizing the drive-by shooting on Tupac. But a different theory says that Tupac's death was part of a larger East Coast-West Coast rap feud that involved rappers like the Notorious B.I.G. He was also murdered in a similar way 6 months later. Others say that Tupac's death was a result of internal conflict within Death Row Records, with Suge Knight himself organizing the murder to prevent Tupac from leaving the label. And there are some fans that believe Tupac faked his own death and is living in hiding. This theory is fueled by some supposed sightings of him and cryptic messages that he left in his music before apparently faking his own death. Despite multiple documentaries, books, and even police task forces dedicated to solving the case, Tupac's murder remains a mystery to this day. The assassination of John F. Kennedy. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, is probably the most famous unsolved mystery in American history. As we all know, Kennedy was shot while riding in a car in Dallas, Texas, while he was on a political campaign. After that, a guy named Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested and charged with the murder. But 2 days later, he was killed by a nightclub owner before he could stand trial. The official investigation concluded that Oswald acted alone, but this was a subject of major skepticism. Many believe there was a larger conspiracy that involved different groups, such as the CIA, the Mafia, anti-Castro Cubans, or even politicians within the U.S. government itself. The sudden murder of Oswald, along with the inconsistencies and gaps in the investigation, only made these suspicions bigger. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence is the famous Zapruder film, which captured the assassination on camera. Analyses of this footage have led some to argue that there were multiple shooters, contradicting the lone gunman theory, and many witnesses reported hearing shots from different directions as well. The release of classified documents over the years raised more questions than it answered. That's why this murder case is keeping the debate alive more than half a century later. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart. In 1937, Amelia Earhart set off to fly around the world with her navigator, Fred Noonan. She wanted to become the first woman pilot to circumnavigate the globe. On July 2nd, Amelia and her navigator took off in their plane from the airport in New Guinea. Their destination was Howland Island. The expected flying time to the island was about 20 hours, but when they were near the Howland Island, the communication from them was lost and their plane vanished over the Pacific Ocean. Despite extensive search efforts, no trace of Amelia, Fred, or their plane was found. Several theories have emerged over the years. The most common one is that Amelia's plane ran out of fuel, causing them to crash into the ocean. Another popular theory suggests that they may have landed on a nearby island and survived for a while before succumbing to the harsh elements of nature. In fact, some artifacts have been found, including a piece of metal believed to be from her plane, and also some skeletal remains, but none have been conclusively linked to Amelia. More ideas suggested that Amelia and Fred were captured by Japanese forces, as the area was close to Japanese-held territories at the time. Some even believe that Amelia survived the war and returned to the United States under a new identity. But despite many expeditions and investigations, Amelia Earhart's fate remains unknown. The Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer was one of the most brutal and twisted criminals from the 20th century. During the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Zodiac Killer terrorized Northern California with a series of cold-blooded murders. He claimed to have killed 37 people, but only 5 victims have been confirmed. The killer taunted the police and the media with cryptic letters, ciphers, and phone calls, bragging to them about his crimes and threatening to do more killings. The Zodiac's letters contained complicated ciphers, some of which remain unsolved to this day. Over the years, many suspects have been suggested, but none have been definitively linked to the crimes. His methods were really frightening because of their randomness and brutality. He attacked young couples in secluded areas, shooting or stabbing them without any clear motive. This unpredictability made him really terrifying and also harder to catch. After all these years, the Zodiac Killer hasn't been caught or even identified. The lack of any solid evidence and the passage of time have only added to the mystery. Today, the Zodiac Killer remains a haunting figure, showing the cruel side of human nature. The Mary Celeste. Now let's talk about the Mary Celeste, a ship found abandoned in the Atlantic Ocean in 1872. The ship was found in good condition, with its cargo intact, and there was plenty of food and water on board. But the crew, including Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, and their 2-year-old daughter, was nowhere to be found. Several theories have been proposed to explain the disappearance of the ship's crew. Some suggested that they abandoned the ship in a lifeboat because they feared an explosion from alcohol vapor in the cargo. Others think they may have been swept overboard into the sea by a wave or a sudden earthquake. There were also some more disturbing suggestions, like piracy or even mutiny from the crew itself, but there was no sign of struggle or violence. Another theory involves the possibility of a trick from the crew of De Grazia. That was the ship that found the Mary Celeste abandoned. Some believe that the crew of that ship might have had a hand in the disappearance, but this theory lacks solid evidence. Despite a lot of investigation, the fate of Mary Celeste's crew remains a mystery. No lifeboat or crew member was ever found. The Dyatlov Pass Incident. In January of 1959, 9 hikers led by Igor Dyatlov set off on an expedition through the Ural Mountains in Russia. They were expected back in February but never returned. When a search party found their campsite, they discovered a scene that raised more questions than answers. The hikers' tent was ripped open from the inside, and their stuff was left behind. The group ran away from their tents into the freezing night, and some were without shoes or proper clothing. Their bodies were found scattered around the area, showing signs of violent and brutal injuries. Some had broken bones and severe internal injuries, yet no external wounds. One hiker was missing her tongue and eyes. Many theories have been suggested over the years. Some believe they were attacked by wild animals, but the injuries didn't match any typical animal attacks. Others think they were victims of a military test gone wrong, possibly involving secret weapons or radiation, because some bodies had traces of radiation on them. Natural explanations like an avalanche or a sudden snowstorm have been considered, but the evidence doesn't completely fit these theories either. Recently, some researchers proposed that a rare weather phenomenon called a katabatic wind might have forced the hikers to escape from their tent in panic. Despite many investigations and theories, the true cause of the incident remains unsolved. The Black Dahlia. On January 15, 1947, the body of Elizabeth Short, an aspiring actress, was found in an empty lot in Los Angeles. She was brutally murdered, and her body was cut in half and drained of blood. The killer also carved a smile into her face, which made the murder even more cruel. Elizabeth Short was nicknamed the Black Dahlia by the press, who sensationalized the case. Despite an extensive investigation, the police were never able to identify her killer. Over the years, more than 150 50 suspects have been considered, but none were ever charged. Several theories have emerged about who might have killed Elizabeth. Some think it was a surgeon or doctor due to the precise nature of the cuts on her body. Others think it could have been someone she knew, perhaps a jealous lover or a friend. There were also rumors of mob involvement and connections to other unsolved murders. One of the most compelling suspects was George Hodel, a doctor whose son was a retired LAPD detective. His son later claimed that his father was the actual killer, and then the investigation uncovered evidence that linked George Hodel to the crime. But the evidence was incomplete, so he was let go. The gruesome nature of the Black Dahlia murder and the mystery surrounding it have kept it in the public eye for decades. The disappearance of the Sauter children. On Christmas Eve in 1945, a fire broke out at the Sauter family home in West Virginia. George and Jenny Sauter, along with 9 of their children, were asleep when the fire started. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children managed to escape from the fire, but the other 5 children were never seen again. The official explanation was that the children burned in the fire, but no remains were ever found in the ashes. This fact, along with several strange occurrences before and after the fire, led the Sauters to believe that their children were kidnapped. George found the phone lines to the house had been cut, and his truck, which he planned to use to rescue the children, wouldn't start. A witness claimed to have seen the missing children in a car, driving away from the house during the fire. The Sauter family placed a billboard near their home, with pictures of the missing children and a plea for help. Over the years, the Sauters received countless tips and sightings, including a photograph of a young man sent anonymously to Jenny in 1967, which bore a striking resemblance to their son Louis. But despite these leads, the fate of the Sauter children remains unknown.